Being a nurse in the psychedelic field is not without its challenges. I know this, and if you've listened to this podcast, you know me and the challenges I've had around being a nurse and navigating psychedelic spaces. Today, I have two amazing nurses with me on the podcast, Stephanie Van Hope and Angela Ward, and they have an amazing program called Return to Roots, where they're preparing nurses for the psychedelic renaissance. This is so aligned with the Condor approach, it's ridiculous. And I'm so excited to bring this podcast interview to you with these two amazing, knowledgeable nurses who are supporting people in psychedelics. And more than just supporting people, they're supporting other nurses so that nurses can become empowered, because this type of information and education is not built into our colleges and universities yet, but they're starting and they've got an accredited program, and I can't wait for us to dive in.
Whether you're a life coach, therapist, biohacker, invested in wellness, or in the healthcare profession, if you have an intention to work in psychedelic spaces, you're in the right place then. If you're called, get involved. But first, get informed. Let's talk the 4 N's: intake, intention, in-space integration, leading to deeper transformations. Psychedelic Coach Podcast, Todd Cole. Walk you through the process, it's all possible. Leave space for the follow through. Most importantly, integration is not optional.
One more thing before we get started, y'all. If you're an outlier, a rebel, a person who goes against the grain, a trailblazer, I'm inviting you to join us for the next Condor Approach live event. This is an event where community is a huge deal when it comes to learning the in and outs of navigating your nervous system, navigating your emotions, and really being able to integrate all of your transformational experiences, be they from transformational experiences with plants, with fungi, or just in a coaching experience in general life processes. So I would love to have you with all of the other rebels, outliers, and trailblazers at the next Condor Approach. So join us at thecondorapproach.com for more information, and let's get started with the episode. Welcome to the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. It's Ty. I'm super excited to be here with y'all. I have some really amazing guests today that I've been beyond excited and stoked to have on the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. Y'all know I've been wanting to get nurses on this podcast as often as I possibly can, because I'm a nurse and I come from a very indoctrinated space of avoidance of psychedelics and shaming of psychedelics. And to have other nurses on this podcast with me that are diving into the courage around bringing psychedelics to the mainstream of wellness is beyond exciting to me. And so today I have some amazing nurses that are coming with a program called Return to Roots. And we have the amazing Angela Ward and Stephanie Van Hope here. Hey, y'all, peace. Welcome to the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. How y'all doing today?
Doing great here. Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you, Ty.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you for coming on to talk about everything that's going on in psychedelics and to share a bit about what y'all are doing. And nursing is a wonderful space. We met through Reconsider, and Reconsider is an amazing event that happens in upstate New York, where I met 22 nurses from all over the United States and one from Canada that are working in psychedelics. And I've been amped up about getting as many of these nurses on the Psychedelic Coach Podcast as possible. So thank y'all for being here. And I'm grateful to Reconsider for connecting us. And so I would love to hear from either of you. What are your thoughts around psychedelics and what's driving you to do the work that you're doing? Let's start with Angela. Let's go.
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question. I love it. First of all, I have so much gratitude for Reconsider. I went to the very first nurses gathering, and it was so empowering to be in the same shared space with all kinds of nurses working in different applications of nursing and in psychedelic care. It's inspiring because I think so many of us as nurses we're working in this field, but we can't keep our heads down and just kind of attend to our patients or our clients or the people that we're working for. So wonderful to connect with others and lift our voices up together. What inspires me about this work, I come from a background where I had some trauma, and experiences with expanded states were some of the most important parts of my personal healing. I felt very strongly after those experiences how much having an expanded state, psychedelic supportive experience could really help people. And I felt committed to bringing this forward using my privilege as a nurse and the trust that we have with our nursing licenses to bring this forward in a safe way, in a way that people can really feel cared for and trusted. And I also feel like nurses have a really unique voice and approach in these caring, helping professions that can work so beautifully with psychedelic experiences. It's just a whiff of what brought me here.
Thank you. It's a big whiff. Burning with that sage burning in the background, fam. Let's go.
Palo Santo.
Oh, that Palo Santo burning, even better. So, Stephanie, talk to us. What's your inspiration?
So I've been a nurse for 13 years, and I started off in acute care oncology, which was like as far away from the kind of my own like spiritual center as could be, probably that particular situation. But I loved being a nurse and valued the experience. And then at that time, I also was really lucky to kind of link up with some people who were in the NYU Psilocybin Cancer Anxiety Project. And I got to work as a study guide for that research project, guiding patients with cancer through sessions with psilocybin to address their existential anxiety. And so that was like kind of always at the beginning of my nursing career, like this interest in these medicines. And then all at the same time, I kind of started on my own spiritual path, or deepened on it, and was part of a spiritual community for also the last 13 years, where we studied sacred traditions from different places in the world, but particularly North and South American traditions. And so I feel like my calling in the last number of years has been to kind of like bring these worlds together and integrate for myself, is to see that these medicines are coming into the mainstream, and how can I take all the experiences that I've had to be able to try to contribute to that being in a good way that's really connected and holistic, safe, respectful, culturally humble, all of those things. And that's what kind of brought Angela and I together to create this course.
Wonderful. So thank you for that. And I appreciate both of your angles in the different spaces that you come from and how you're coalescing and bringing things together. And I feel like nurses are unique in this space because we come from all these different walks of life. And most of us come from very traumatic backgrounds. Most of us, I would dare say all of us, but most of us I know come from traumatic backgrounds where we've been looking to remedy our own stuff and support other people and not having to be where we were. So thank you for what you're doing. So before we dive into a lot of the semantics around nursing, because I got some questions for you, all right? Before we get into that, Return to Roots is a program that's for nurses, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would love to hear about what it is that you've created specifically for nurses, because I think I have 7 nurses that have taken the Condor approach. Of the 170 or so people that have taken the Condor approach, I think we have 7 nurses. 4 of them are coming to reconsider in May, right? Okay. Like my nurses, the nurses that have come to the Condor approach are epic. And so I would love to hear about what inspired you to create Return to Roots and what makes it different compared to other self-development courses for nurses.
Oh gosh, can I jump on it? So I think, as someone who's had a lot of psychedelic training and experience, I feel that most trainings out there are really geared towards a psychotherapeutic model and languaging. And it's also oftentimes missing some of the whole human aspect. Some of these programs are. They're looking more at pathology, or we're looking at more bringing psychedelics into a really Western medical model. And I find that a couple of the things that are missing and that I long to bring to the bedside is this spiritual component, this holistic nursing approach, using the language of our own nursing elders and theorists and practices in order to support people through expanded states. You want to take over, Stephanie?
Sure. There really isn't, I don't know of any other programs out there available right now for nurses that are nursing specific related to psychedelics. So that's really unique about our course. But in addition, Angela and I are both holistic nurses and nurse coaches, and we feel that that is a perfect fit for this work. And we really want to create a framework based around holistic nursing. And so this program it's a self-development course for psychedelic inspired nurses. So it's not a psychedelic training program. But it is an opportunity, an invitation for 10 weeks to dive into deepening your own capacity to hold space, your reflective practice, your self-care, and thinking about the different structures within nursing and holistic nursing in particular that can support this work. And it can also be for nurses who maybe have had their own psychedelic experiences and just want to think about how that might inform their nursing practice wherever they are. It might not mean that they necessarily want to be a psychedelic guide, but maybe they just want to integrate some of what they've experienced into their work.
Also wanted to add that our program has been accredited by the American Holistic Nurses Association for 36 contact hours, which is 3/4 of the contact hours needed to sit for your holistic nursing board certification, which is the only program of its kind out there like that for nurses.
Yep. And sometimes employers will reimburse for those expenses.
That is epic.
Yeah.
That's epic. And I know as a nurse, part of the thing with me with taking courses when I was in clinical nursing was, am I going to get CEUs for this, right? Am I going to get credits for this? And I feel like with the Condor approach, there's been a challenge for nurses to lean in because they want to get credits. And we are not accredited for any kind of continuing ed yet. And so this is where this bonus comes in with what y'all are doing and the care that y'all have put in to have that is a big advantage. Nursing is its own culture, and there are, and with its own culture, it has its own vulture. And nursing has been notorious for nurses eat their young. And this is something that has been built into the culture of nursing, and it's still very prevalent to this day. And I find that the more people that we have in this field, in this realm around psychedelics, I see less vulturing, less people cutting throats, and more people leaning into it. Can you say anything to that with building a culture around psychedelic nursing, how the program that y'all have created, Return to Roots, would be supportive of moving that dynamic out of the way?
I think, the organization that we've started together that's supporting this program is called Holistic Psychedelic Nursing Collective. And that's really what we aim for it to be, as a collective where we are gathering together nursing wisdom. So it's not even a situation in this course of us necessarily it always being a top-down learning experience. It's a collective learning experience where we're hopefully going to be just eliciting the wisdom from people in their practices and together creating something that doesn't exist yet, which is a psychedelic nursing framework, educational pathway. What we're doing is the start of that. And I feel like when I think about where I belong in this world and the kind of work that I want to do, I think like I've thought about it, and I just want to create a space to nurture people and to nurture their growth, and specifically within nursing, because there's many different places in this growing field for somebody to land in. It can be in facilitation directly, but maybe not. And I just feel really passionate about creating a space where people can grow and be themselves and learn from each other. So I guess like all I can say is that's my intention, and I hope that it does trickle out into, I think what I learned, I created a course for nurses called Nursing and Sacred Medicine, which I still which is still available online. It's more of an introductory, like very introductory level course. And what I aimed to explore in that course is how nursing can support psychedelic work. But what I found out more from the nurses in that program was how psychedelics have the potential to transform nursing, and how so many people, a lot of people in that course, this was a couple of years ago when I was doing it live during the pandemic, were on a leave of absence because they had been burnt out. Like nurses really are struggling and suffering right now, and especially in the past few years, and are turning to, are needing, in order just to survive, some serious modes of healing for themselves. And so I'm seeing like this interesting synergy of like giving and receiving within nursing, like receiving the healing and then hopefully being able to participate in the healing of others.
So what I'm hearing is kind of a full circle type of deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I influence you, you influence me. I inspire you, you inspire me. It kind of moves in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Being in reciprocity with the
Yeah.
people we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And the influence of psychedelics on nursing is, just like you were saying, is just as important as nursing's influence on psychedelics. I believe they can be mutually powerful in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And you providing a space for nurses specifically to have a safe place to land around psychedelics, even with open nurses, right? This is a very safe space for nurses to go to be able to discuss things that were taboo. When I started exploring psychedelics, I opened my mouth and said something at the hospital, and people were like, "You better shut up. Are you doing drugs?" And like, it was this crazy thing. And so I got very nervous, right? I thought my license was going to be threatened. I thought my money was going to be threatened. People started to look at me sideways. So I just shut up and I didn't say anything about it. But they noticed that I was different. There was this noticing, like, what's going on with you? You're different. I was always upbeat when I went to the hospital, but there was something a lot cleaner to my energy and how I showed up and my presence. And so this space of the psychedelics affecting this nurse and me seeing how it affected me, and then how I affected my practice and the other nurses around me, changed the entire unit dramatically. Like I saw the shifts in my triage. I saw the shifts in my nursing care, in the way I interacted with people, the way I interacted with the doctors, and everybody saw it, but nobody could put their finger on it. And I was afraid to speak on it. I'd love to hear what y'all have to say about this in regards to nurses not being able to speak up about their experiences and not having a safe place to land.
That's such a challenging question. I'm one of the co-founders of the Organization of Psychedelic and Entheogenic Nurses, opennurses.org. And part of the reason we formed that was to create a safe space where we could talk about our experiences, but also how to navigate these waters around protecting our license, forwarding research and education. And also, nurses are so respected for our ability to do harm reduction and provide education. It's challenging because I've had those same experiences working with people where I noticed a huge shift in my practice when I had more experiences, or when other nurses I know have had experiences. We carry so much secondary trauma in the hospital or wherever, bedside nursing oftentimes. We are with people through really big deal experiences from birth to death and everything in between. And yet oftentimes we're told to then just walk away and pick up the call light for the next person and just like stuff it down and off you go. There's a lot of suffering that nurses experience. And I think that really is what contributes to the eating of our own. But we have to be really careful talking about these experiences. There's multiple nurses out in the community that have either lost their jobs for microdosing and being open about it, or I know a nurse who had a complicated situation. Basically, her nursing board reported her for not showing up for a urine test and then required her to come in and have one, and found substances in her urine. She'd been working with, I think it was ketamine, but underground, right, without a prescription for it, for her own management of her mood symptoms. So we don't really have a space to grow our own deep roots of support and practice in order to show up fully with patients in those really challenging states.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you to your friend at the forefront of things, for your colleague, for our colleague. I'm going to call it the way I need to call it. It's our colleague as a nurse. And one of the most challenging things that I've had to experience as a nurse is that the hospital was always ready to fire us or punish us or do something to us for behaving outside of what they required us to do, even if it was for our own benefit. And this is one of the challenging things with psychedelics right now, is that there's still a huge stigma on this. And this is why I appreciate y'all being here on this podcast right now, is because y'all are supporting the lifting the stigma. You are two esteemed nurses, right? Y'all don't just have one letter after your name. You got a bunch of letters, right? Like there's a whole lot of accolades after these names.
Well, I mean, I think it says a lot that we have an accredited program, that things are changing enough to have those CEs. And I think there's the tack that I've always taken is there is a lot of research out there that you can, when you want to have a conversation with somebody about certain substances, you can talk about what's already been published. Like, for example, one of our colleagues, Caroline Dorson, she wrote a really wonderful paper about people's lived experiences in like medicine ceremonies and how they described them and how they conceptualize them. It's different than drug experiences. I'm so grateful for people who are doing that kind of work, like, and also other qualitative stories from some of the clinical trials, to be able to share with other people, like those wonderful stories, which we cultivate a lot in nursing stories, but it's not your story. And so it doesn't put you at risk, but you can still kind of get the message across. And then also, I think the lens of harm reduction also, and it's another way to be able to protect yourself a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. Caroline Dorson actually brought me into Reconsider.
Oh, cool. She's wonderful.
She's awesome. I love Caroline.
Yeah. We love
Listen
you.
to her. She's awesome. Like, I want to get her up on this podcast. She's an amazing.
Can I tag on a little bit to what Stephanie just was sharing now?
Please.
Because I think one of the things that our program is hoping to address, especially when we're talking about roots, is really what brought us to nursing in the first place. And I would imagine that for me and for many nurses, we came here because we have a heart for healing and for being in relationship with people through that process. One of the things that is missing, it's just the facts of the capitalist system running healthcare in this country, is we're losing the capacity to really slow down with people and be with them through their human experience. And we're hoping to really help the nurses that go through this course to tap into their own roots of healing. Like, what are their ancestral lineages that had wisdom around healing that maybe came through nursing or maybe through some other folkways or practices? Like, where are our resources and what does it really mean to help people heal?
Thank you for that. And with that, one of the questions that comes up on this podcast a lot, my guest, is what is healing? Now, healing is a word that's thrown around a lot on the internet. It's thrown around a lot by people in the psychedelic spaces. What does that mean to y'all? Anybody?
I might have already used it a bunch of times on this podcast, but generally, it's not a word that speaks to me as much as it used to, or I try not to use it as much because when it comes to sacred medicine, like, there's healing, but there's also beyond healing. There's expansion of consciousness. There's transformation. There's communion. There's celebration. I feel like I'm really glad that our culture is putting more attention towards healing and towards well-being, but then also sometimes it feels like we kind of get stuck there with always focusing on the wounds instead of maybe the strengths and the gifts of our human experience. But that being said, what is healing? I think healing is probably, for me, bringing into awareness, like having more awareness of the processes that are going on inside your mind, body, and spirit. Because I worked in hospice for many years, and I know that healing can happen without the resolution of symptoms, without curing. It can happen in the process of dying. And I think it has to do with just getting in touch with and being in communion with yourself on all levels.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of that. There's this more about presence and wholeness when I think about healing. I'm a labor and delivery nurse by training, but also specialized in perinatal bereavement and worked a lot with death at birth. And what is healing there? But there's something about the families I've worked with when they've been able to be present with what's happening, with lots of hands around them through their heartbreak or their pain and their suffering. That's, this resonance or connection. One of the things that we are really teaching in this course is how we can help create and hold the healing environment. What does that look like? And especially not oriented towards just symptom management or recovering a wound, that's part of it for sure, but also what is right about the experiences that are unfolding in front of us? What can we do to bring in a sense of beauty or sacredness or transcendence and just the human experience as well? How can we kind of like align all that? I think that's
when I was thinking about when Angela and I were doing some kind of soul searching about this course and what we wanted to teach, that was the light bulb moment for me. The healing environment. That's where nurses are so well suited for working with sacred medicines, because that's our work. Is really a lot of it is about the environment of care. And it's just that this work requires even more attention to that, because the healing environment can be happening on the energetic level, or it is happening on the energetic level in addition to everything else. And so it just requires even more care and attention. But I think nurses already kind of have that programmed into their DNA of care.
Thanks, y'all. This is one of the most challenging questions that I ask people. And everybody has this different lens on it, but we all speak about health. And we work in quote unquote health care. The way we work at the Condor approach is to heal is to bring yourself into a space of wholeness with some stabilization. So healing is not an endpoint. You don't get healed and then that's it. It's an ongoing process. And so what are you healing into? What are you becoming whole with? And are you integrating that from a space of intention or not? This is where we call it healthy, right? Healthy. I am healthy. Heal thy mind, right? To make whole thy mind, to make whole thy body, to make whole thy interactions and relationships. And so y'all seem to be coming from the same place I'm coming from. So I appreciate it. I always want to dial in and make sure that we're in a similar context space as we talk about this stuff, because no matter what words we put on it, we're still looking towards in the same direction with this stuff. So thank you. I appreciate y'all dancing the dance with me on that space. We are in health care, heal care. So I'm loving what y'all have created. And I have a question I'd love to ask. Is this exclusively for nurses who are looking to get into therapy, or is it just for people who are looking to become psychedelic curious? Tell me more about that.
Well, an interesting choice of words, therapy. I would just say that psychedelic care is not exclusive to a psychotherapeutic model, and there's lots of approaches to psychedelic care. This course is designed for nurses of any level, students to advanced degrees, retired, that has an interest in applying psychedelic and holistic principles, including this reciprocity and connection to maybe some spirit and ancestry work, to be in a practice together for 10 weeks. Because there is an educational component for sure, but really we're facilitating an opportunity for people to dive into their own experience. And what do we need to cultivate within ourselves in order to carry this forward, whether that be in someone's standard nursing practice, but also moving forward into psychedelic facilitation if that's where people are wanting to head. So it's really laying the foundation, because we can't serve in any capacity. We can't serve from an empty cup. If we don't have the resources available to us, especially when we're working with people with big expanded state experiences, being depleted, that's just going to break us down. I had an experience working in the hospital for many years. I worked night shift. I was also the union representative on my floor and bargained our contract at the same time, which was like total stress and chaos. And I ended up having my body shut down. I had a really bad physical reaction that took 2 years to heal from. I think that we as nurses oftentimes put ourselves into places where, in an attempt to help create healing, we actually harm ourselves quite a bit more. It's almost a badge of honor if you can never pee for 12 hours or not eat or pull a 16-hour overnight multiple nights in a row. That doesn't give us any resource to carry the energy, to be the healing environment to bring forward.
This is one of the reasons why I want more nurses on this podcast, is because I've been feeling in this psychedelic space, I've been feeling very alone for a long time. And so since I got into the reconsider space and I started to do the Condor approach and nurses came to the Condor approach, I started to feel more connected because we have a very unique lens of seeing the world. And so what y'all are offering is a landing pad for nurses who are curious. This is what I'm getting from it. Who are curious about psychedelics or have had a psychedelic experience and they're not sure what direction to go in, but they want to be able to see all the options and how to actually apply this stuff to what they're doing as an individual person, as a human being, as a nurse who is a human being, and then as a practitioner who's working with people who may or may not have had psychedelic experiences, and they will know how to navigate those spaces more clearly since they have these foundational tenets and tools that y'all are providing.
Right.
Does that sound?
If you think about it, most nurses that work in a hospital environment deal with people in altered states, non-ordinary states of consciousness all day. Like whether it's people who are giving birth or at the end of their life or in delirium or coming out of sedation or just going through trauma, nurses have the opportunity to apply these principles like right away where they are. And that's one of the things that we're excited about. So it's for nurses in any type of practice who just want to hone their skills of presence and self-reflection and self-care, caring for the healing environment and energetic competencies. And it's also for nurses who are curious about the path of becoming a practitioner because we feel this is a really good place to start. For me, the best place to start isn't about learning about all the different substances and dosing and interactions and biology. It's with yourself and your presence. And then for nurses who are already doing this work, this could also just be a really nice way to commune in connection with other nurses and to take those 10 weeks as a practice for yourself to revamp and to re-nourish yourself.
This is very aligned with what we do at the Condor approach. And one of the things that I always talk about is walking into an emergency room it's an altered state experience, period, right? Having a twisted ankle is an altered state. Like everything that you just said aligns with everything. I got goosebumps. You can see them on the right? Everything that you said aligns with what I'm talking about at the Condor approach all the time. We as nurses are in a space where we are always supporting people in navigating altered states, but we send them home with discharge instructions and we don't really support them in integrating those discharge instructions or what happened in the experience. And this is why the Condor approach was born, because integration is not optional. You're going to integrate that experience. How you integrate it is the option. And it sounds like y'all are laying a foundation for nurses to really start to understand that there is a different lens that you can see these things through, these altered experiences and these altered states. It's not just about psychedelics. It's about the altered state of the human experience and how you can navigate that. I mean, every day for me is a psychedelic experience. Look at my shirt. Right? Always that way for me.
Can I say a little something about the altered state, though?
Please.
One thing this is my soapbox. You don't have to join me on it. However, from the background of nursing and healthcare, the word altered inherently means a pathology. It means that someone experiencing a different than ordinary state of consciousness is somehow, there's something wrong. with altered. There's also, when we're talking about an animal that has been neutered, they've been altered. So that indicates that the non-ordinary state, the expanded state or non-ordinary state, is less than whole and vital. And I would say anyone that spent any time next to a birthing woman in between contractions, she is tranced out. She is somewhere else completely. And that altered consciousness, I mean, unless you're saying it alter, like we're approaching the sacred altar, which I would hope that we are when we're approaching people in these states, that this is part of the human experience. And really, we should bring a sense of reverence and honoring to that experience rather than checking it off in a list as a pathology that something is wrong with this expression that we're seeing in front of us.
Ty, you were saying that in your experience with transformational medicines gave you this kind of vitality and energy in your work that other people noticed. But sometimes it can be really challenging, actually, to have that transformational experience, to really maybe, especially if you go to a retreat or work with a practitioner and who is very honoring and sacred, and you feel how wonderful it feels to be treated that way in the context of a transformative medicine. And then you go back into your more kind of secular, profane healthcare environment, and you look around and you're like, I can't stand this one day more. Like, it can make it a lot harder to do the work. And this is also an opportunity, like, just to recognize that and to recognize how people do feel alone. And maybe the answer is leaving your environment, or maybe the answer is figuring out your strategies so that you can feel in integrity with the way that you care for patients, and how to have the courage to do that, and to have other nurses that support you, even if they're not necessarily on your unit, but this network of nurses that we're creating that can support people in figuring out their pathway that feels good and authentic to them.
Thank you for that. I feel like you've just acknowledged me and my journey. And people noticed that I was different, but it felt very, like I said, it felt very lonely. I felt extremely alone. And I kept saying to Cole, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I'm not being seen. I'm not being heard. I'm not being understood. And I'm watching what the system is doing with a clearer lens. And so I took an oath, and I know both of you took this oath, to do no harm, right? That's part of the Hippocratic oath. I promised to do no harm. I was walking into that hospital every day of my life, sending people the procedures I knew they didn't need or it was detrimental to them. I was giving them medication. I can give you a slew of medications that nobody ever needs to take. Like there was a lot of stuff that I was doing that was contrary to me as an integral human being. And that was causing me to have more trauma every day. And I felt like I was out of integrity with myself. And so I was lying to myself. I was lying to other people. The only place that I thought I could be honest was at the hospital. Now, if you've listened to some of my podcasts in the past, I am a person who was built off of lies. I lied about everything. And when I started going into my psychedelic experiences, I found out that my lies were a control mechanism. I was looking to control my environment. And so the only place that I felt like I could be safe to be myself was at the hospital. And when I figured out that I was participating in a system that was being disingenuous, I started to have more and more challenges as a result of my psychedelic experiences and becoming a person of integrity with myself who did not want to lie any longer.
Yeah.
And so that became a huge challenge for me. And I had no colleagues that I could lean into. Caroline was one of those people. One, right? One. And how often did I get to see her? One person that I could speak to. And now I have all of the Reconsider nurses. I have y'all. We got open nurses. We have all of this stuff opening up. And this is what y'all are providing nurses with is a gift in ways that I can't express gratitude enough for. I can't express it enough for what y'all are doing, because I know there's another nurse or hundreds of nurses or thousands of nurses out there who are having challenges the way I've had challenges. And if they've had psychedelic experiences, they may be questioning themselves like I was. And to not have a safe place to land because you're afraid somebody's going to take your license, they're going to take your money and all the things that you've worked so hard to get to.
Or they're gonna laugh at you. They're gonna try to I felt like for me, the hardest part was, so I went from, like I mentioned, I started off in acute oncology in the city, and it was just a harsh environment. And I was taking care of patients who were dying, but we didn't really talk about that. And then I moved into hospice, and that was a place where I got to just open my heart and shine my light more and not be afraid of giving that care and love. Because in the environment that I was in prior, it was like almost, I was like a little embarrassed to really shine my light and to like treat people with that sacredness. I still did, but it almost felt like something I had to hide. So that was what really hurt me. And I'd love to cultivate a new culture and to support other nurses where they're at with that.
And thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for sharing that. I totally hear what you're saying, Todd, about the difficulty of going into a system that's out of integrity. Like it's Western healthcare has an intention that is getting really pulled away from the heart of why they're there. But the people that are in those settings are good people. As you were talking, one thing that I think is so wonderful about nurses is it only takes one nurse to make a huge difference in someone's experience when they're in the hospital setting or in their healing, whatever that they're going through. I'm sure we all have memories of having a nurse that did something really incredible or just like had a feeling or a slowed down energy with us. I don't know that that is the only exclusive territory of a psychedelic experience and then someone bringing that towards the bedside, but rather, as you were talking, it was making me think of a story Joanna Macy tells about the rise of the Shambhala warriors that are coming in to help alleviate suffering with the tools of compassion and of radical insight into the oneness that we all share. And I think that when we carry that within ourselves into our caring for others, it has such an embodied resonance for people. They feel it. And not just for the patient that we're caring for, but the other people on the floor.
Mm.
It's really impactful.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that we can only fight that battle individually for so long. That was part of the reason I left hospital nursing is I just could not, it was unhealthy for me eventually. But I still absolutely love the nurses that are willing to cultivate that and carry that in their interactions and into those spaces that seem really oppressive or out of integrity.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a conversation in the Reconsider Nurses thread where I was commenting on how sometimes like nursing dark humor can be really difficult for me because I come from like the background in my spiritual community. It's like we don't curse and like we just try to use really positive language and like good hygiene of speech. And then when I go into the nursing environment, sometimes I'm like, this is intense. These people are intense, and do they even know what they're creating with their words? But it sparked a really good conversation on the thread of people saying like, and I recognize this for sure, that people being like, hey, we're working in the inner city ED, we're working with veterans, we're working on inpatient psych, and it's rough out here, and this is how we cope. And some people said, since doing programs like CIIS or like other training programs, I have changed my practice and I've altered it. And the way I speak to people, the way I try to inspire my colleagues. And at the same time, like we're still here, and like the way that the work trickles down into those sometimes dark spaces is a really beautiful thing. That it's like, I don't know if I have it's not my place right now to be in that, like in the trenches. And I also really respect those who are there. And I love the bridging. I think so much about working with psychedelics is about integration and bridging. And so it's like, there's those of us that are doing what Angela and what all three of us are doing, that's more in the healing space. And then there's those who are deep in the healthcare space, but they're still bringing in those little rays of light, which I love.
So good. Thank you for that. And I liken working in the emergency room to a pirate ship. You're walking you're walking into a pirate ship. So if you're
Yeah.
looking for people to really be pleasant and sweet, you may have another thing come in because
Right.
so thank you for that whole contrast. And Stephanie, I wanted to ask you if you could discuss your journey in integrating sacred traditions and spirituality into your nursing practice. How does that intersect with the current psychedelic revival?
Right. Thank you. Because I do always love to start and like off the conversation by acknowledging that these practices are ancient and have been in different traditional settings for thousands of years and held in community, and people have given their lives to protect these medicines in some cases. And there's a lot to learn from different indigenous traditions, and I think mostly to learn from some of the worldviews, some of the sacred medicine threads that I like to think of them as, such as like just things like medicine often being used as a sacrament, medicine being used in a community setting, music being integral to the healing experience. And at the same time, I'm also recognizing that it's going to be a very complex and messy process for us as a Western culture to integrate sacred medicine back into our practices. And we're going to have to figure out our way of doing it, and a way that comes from us. And like, so we're pretty healthcare and medicine, like medical establishment heavy in this country, in this culture. So that's the lens that we're kind of exploring things through first. And I, over the last few years, have come to really respect that, to respect our way of finding our way. But the more that we can take opportunities to listen to elders and to understand, like I was saying, some of the larger threads of reciprocity and respect for all of life, rather than necessarily like specific spiritual technologies with a specific medicine from a specific culture that might not really translate that well to our culture, but more focusing on some of those larger themes that so many of us just feel. We feel them. We feel the absence of them in our culture right now. We feel the disconnection. We feel the lack of reverence, and it hurts us. And so there's so much that we do have to learn.
So much that we have to learn, and we're learning. And thank you for that. And thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you for being able to lean into the indigenous spaces, into the historical spaces, into the ancient spaces around this. Bridging science.
Todd, can I say one more thing about that?
Oh, sure.
Another thing that in our course that I'm really excited about is Angela and I are kind of, and we're exploring with all of our students too, but one thing we're going into is some of the roots of Western medicine and the more traditional views that medicine comes from. For example, the four elements. I mean, the four elements and the four humors, which was kind of a foundation of Western medicine that's been looked at as just inaccurate. But if you look at it, it's really about reverence for the elements and the seasons and balance, and also like how the relationship people used to have to herbs and natural medicine, and this how spirituality was intertwined with that. So we look to some of the interesting little nuggets of wisdom that we can find, that we have found from our own lineage in Western medicine, which is a Western lineage. And then we also encourage people to bring in knowledge and wisdom, or discover knowledge and wisdom for their own heritage, whatever that might be.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties into what I was bringing up. Thank you for elaborating on that. The bridging of science and mysticism is a very important space, because science and mysticism in yesteryear was one thing. It was all one thing. And somehow we've got it into this separate space. And so when we bring it back to that, which is what it sounds like y'all are doing with this program, and the work that you're doing is becoming another bridge. That's what we do with the Condor approach. We're bridging things together so that people have this way of taking the old with the new. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can bring everything together, and that's integration. So it sounds like everything y'all are doing is aligned with what we're doing. So, Angela, I wanted to ask you about guiding your psychedelic experiences, your transformative experiences, and how that informs your approach to coaching and teaching processes with this.
It's such an honor and so incredibly impactful in people's lives. Um, Primarily, I'm doing ketamine assisted nurse coaching with people. First of all, the coaching model, I think, is really a yummy thing to bring into psychedelic care. Not everybody is doing psychedelic work so they can unpack their deep childhood trauma. And sometimes that comes up and we can make space for that. But a lot of people, I think, are approaching medicine work because they might have a sense that something could feel or be more whole. And through that coaching model, we can practice like really honing in on what those things are and then taking action in the integration component to actually embody some. But the psychedelic aspect is so incredible because it gives people a respite from their standard way of seeing their problems, their issues, their struggles, how they feel about themselves. It's like it lets them have a breath of fresh air and maybe see things from a different perspective, or maybe have a sense of personal forgiveness or self-compassion in ways that they would really have to work hard to access. I think people can still access that without the assistance of medicines, but psychedelics do support that. I've had clients with very incredible experiences, even just working with ketamine. I've had a client who, in his second ketamine session, he was really struggling with grief. His grandmother had passed away and he was very close with her. And in his first IM session, his second ketamine session with me, she visited him. And he told me this as he was coming out of the experience, but he was talking to her while he was in state with the experience. And he welcomed her. You could tell he was talking to somebody and he was saying, yes, yes. And then he said he let her into his body. His grandmother had been a knitter, and she went through his body and she like stitched up all of the places that he'd been heartbroken and like took it all out. It was so powerful for him to like, that came to him in his experience. And because he had that experience, it was almost like he could let go of the ways in which he was feeling broken, and that she had kind of given her blessing to move forward on his path. I just think being able to fold in these practices can really amplify someone's process, especially when it's held in great trust and with support for preparing really well, and then like chop wood, carry water beforehand and chop wood, carry water after, putting it into practice. The psychedelic experience is a tool for transformation or communion with something. And if you don't take some action around it, it's going to float away like a dream. That's just the reality of it. Mm-hmm. So I really wish that our culture would spend a little more time understanding that many of us are excited. I want to sit in ceremony with someone, or I want to provide medicine for people, but there's so much needed around these experiences, inside and outside. And I especially think that nurses are very well suited to this. So
thank you for that. Thank you for that. More goosebumps.
I can tell you so many stories.
More goosebumps. So the Condor approach, we focus on removing the psychedelic experience as the star of the show.
Yes.
Putting the person that's experiencing the psychedelic experience is the star of the show. And the psychedelic experience is a part of a 4-act play of intake, intention, being in the space, which is the psychedelic experience, and then integrating. And that's the 4 ends of psychedelic integration. Intake, intention, in space, integration.
You're missing one. I'm going to bring it.
Sure, bring it.
As a birth worker, we have the golden hour, the golden 24 hours. And one thing that I do see missing oftentimes in traditional psychedelic frameworks is the aftercare component. That place in which someone is not fully back, but are in this kind of quietude of settling back into themselves, I think that's a distinctly unique period. Then when we go right into the integration piece, I'm not saying that your program is missing. I'm just saying.
You couldn't. You couldn't.
But and I think that that's just like such rich territory that we don't talk about. And the quality of care that can happen in that space when someone is being attended to and really lovingly supported,
Mm-hmm.
no agenda,
Mm-hmm.
is probably some of the richest healing part of the experience, I think.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I want to share a couple things on that, if that's okay. So I did have an experience. I was really lucky to be able to go to Oregon because I teach for Synthesis Institute, and I kind of went through their training program to become licensed in Oregon, which included having an experience at a legal psilocybin center. And I hadn't had an experience like that before, with somebody right there one-to-one with me, taking care of everything and just allowing me the freedom to go where I needed to go. And yeah, the aftercare too. And I realized she wasn't a nurse, but it was nursing work. It was even just her carrying my belongings for me as I was leaving because I wasn't thinking about that, or just the physical the service work that nurses are so well cut out for. And it was so impactful for me. I felt so well cared for. I felt so grounded from that experience. I just wanted to affirm what you just shared, Angela. And then I also wanted to just lift Angela up because she really is a pioneer. And I am so I don't know, maybe you do, Angela, but I don't know anybody who is currently working with a nurse coaching model legally above ground as a nurse with ketamine. And it's very revolutionary and impactful. I am also a nurse coach, but I'm not working in the psychedelic space currently like that. But we just wanted to mention about our program that our long-term vision is to create a nurse coaching certification that will be psychedelically oriented. So for right now, there's no psychedelic certification for nurses. And this wouldn't necessarily be that. It would be a nurse coaching certification that a nurse could take in any direction that she wants, but including preparation, integration, and someday when things are more, and now with ketamine, or when things are legal with other substances, with the journey as well. And so I do think it's a great model, and probably the course that we're teaching now with Return to Roots will be a prerequisite for that work that we're going to do in the future. So just wanted to plant that seed.
Yeah, no, thank you for planting the seed. So what are the key principles and teachings from Return to that you feel are kind of essential for nurses that they need in order to engage responsibly in the practice of sacred medicines, of spirit molecules, whatever you choose to call it at this particular juncture?
I think we've spoken to quite a bit of it about creating the healing environment and energetic hygiene, and having some indication of how to approach someone and care for them to the expanded state, tapping into our own resourcing. That's a few I have.
Well, firstly, just to clarify, it really isn't, this course doesn't prepare you to be a psychedelic practitioner. It's a medium length course. And so it's to prepare yourself in a sense, or to nourish yourself if you're already doing that work, or like we said, to bring that work to the bedside work that you're already doing. So I can just think about what our modules are to give you a little hint. I think module 1 is an introduction. Module 2, we're talking about nursing theory, nursing history of nursing and psychedelics. Module 3, we're talking about the history of sacred medicine traditions. Module 4, we're talking about nature and the elements, the 4 elements, and how to use that as a framework for bringing a spiritual foundation that's nature connected to healing encounters, which I think is very unique about our program that I'm really excited about. And also I'm excited because it's new. It's really new for me to even be teaching this in this context. And then the next module is about creating the healing environment. The next one is about self-development and self-resourcing and self-reflection. Then the next one is tending to the healing environment. The next module is creating a healing encounter. So with intention, with energetic hygiene, with ritual. And then the last module is about cultivating your practice and in reciprocity with others, and also some of the ethical elements, keeping yourself in check and holding yourself accountable. And I also, on that note, I do want to bring in just like an acknowledgement of the profundity and also the risk of this work for people. It's not without risk, and that is usually more on the emotional, spiritual risk that people take when they work with these medicines. And so it does require a lot of knowledge, especially around screening or intake, determining what's right for a person, having them determine what's right for them, understanding, like recognizing when things are not going well and how to support people through that. Reaching out to your colleagues, being well resourced and well connected. I'm really inspired right now by Jules Evans, who writes the Ecstatic Integration Substack. And he's just hammering it home of like how we need to be talking about the risks and not just painting this super rosy picture. So I kind of wanted to put that out there too. I mean, related to like the ethical component. But yes, that's kind of, those are the modules that we would take you through. And so it really comes from an intersection of nursing, psychedelics, spirituality, and nature.
Thank you for that. And so I have a great question. What do you believe is the role of the nurse in the psychedelic revival?
A guardian at the gateway. That's what I think. It's my business name that came to me in a non-medicine ceremony, a winter solstice ceremony, that we have the capacity to be in a lot of trust with what's emerging in front of us, to have a sense for when things might be needing an intervention, be that medical or a touch or something like that. I think we have the capacity to support someone through the entire process, in addition to supporting other nurses going through this and in many arenas, but really that being with someone through that sacred transformational experience from beginning to end, screening through integration. That's my opinion.
I mean, I think that's absolutely true. And in terms of even like licensure, like I think in the end, NPs will be able to do all of that, including the prescribing aspect, if that's the model that you're working under in your state in some future time point. But nurses, I think, are capable of everything except for maybe that prescribing aspect. But that might not be necessary. Like in Oregon, it's not a medical model. And there's those people who might want to be a practitioner. People might want to be a guide, but also there's so much needed in the roles of education, advocacy, and collaboration, like interdisciplinary collaboration. And those are 3 areas where nurses also shine. So if you're out there and you're interested in getting involved in this world, but you don't know if you're ready or you don't know if you're called to the path of being a psychedelic guide, know that there is also so much other work out there to do that nurses are really well suited for.
And with that, where can people find you? I know you have the launch of this course coming up. Can you tell people a bit about it?
Sure. If people go to our website, which is holistic-psychedelic-nurse.com/return to roots, they can learn about the course, and they can also RSVP for the webinar. We're going to talk about how to care for patients in non-ordinary states of consciousness and how you can apply psychedelic principles to that. You can sign up and get the replay right away and watch it. We will open enrollment for the course during that webinar. One thing that is really important to both Stephanie and I is to make this program as accessible as possible. It's our first go through, so we're hoping to increase the accessibility over time. But because of that, we've built out a sliding scale, pick it for yourself tuition rate. There's 3 tiers. You can self-select what feels appropriate for you. And also for any of your listeners, Taw, we'd love to offer a coupon for 20% off if they add Condor 20 when they go to checkout to purchase it into this course. That will be good until May 21st, a week before the course begins. That's the main bits about it. You can also email us. I think the email is also on the website, or follow us on Instagram. That's really great too. HP Nurse Collective on Instagram. Message us.
Epic. Thank you for this. 20% off, y'all. Come on now.
Yeah.
Just for being a listener of the Psychedelic Coach Podcast.
Ooh.
Condor 20, that's awesome. Thank you for your generosity. I didn't even know that was coming. Thank you for that. And lean into it, y'all. Lean all the way in with this. Go find out what's going on. all of the information, the websites, the Instagram, everything that you possibly need to get in touch with Angela and Stephanie is going to be in the liner notes for this podcast. So please check the liner notes. It's really important. Follow these amazing human beings on Instagram. Follow along with what they're doing. I know if you go to the website for the Return to Roots, you can scroll down to the bottom and put your email in and get on the email list and sign up for the webinar. I went there and I read the entire website. I'm a geek like that. So make sure you lean into that, y'all. I really want y'all to lean into it. Thank y'all so much for being here. I have a couple of more things I want to ask you. So ketamine is a space that I find a lot of nurses that in psychedelics are engaged in ketamine stuff because ketamine is quote unquote legal, right? Now, I've worked with people in the underground a lot, and people give a lot of crap to ketamine as it not being a classic psychedelic. Look at Angela's face. Right? People give a lot of crap to ketamine for it not being a traditional psychedelic because it's a dissociative anesthetic. And people will get into the science about it. These are the same people that give a lot of crap to LSD and LSA, 2CB, and other engineered altering substances. I would love to hear your perspective on it and what you could shine, what kind of light you could shine on it for people coming from this space where you are intersecting with science and mysticism more than anybody else in the psychedelic field. Okay, so you have a very, very particularly expansive lens that can go into plant medicine, that can go into spirit. We call all of the engineered stuff spirit molecules, and along with the toad venoms and all of these other and frog toxins and all of these different things. So tell us what your vantage point is on it. Ketamine.
Okay, let me go for a sec. Then you go first. So first of all, ketamine was recently found in the slime mold that it naturally releases to fight nematodes. So everybody that's like, it's not natural, guess what? It actually has been found in nature that a little mold fungus makes. So enough of that. Also, the word psychedelic means mind manifesting. Also, that word was created by two white dudes. So let's just calm down for a second. The reality is also 5-MeO DMT or BUFO is also a dissociative. When you think about it, people leave. They leave. So what are we arguing about here? Is there some kind of psychedelic purist situation? That, to me, is not in service of the person that's sitting in front of you. I agree. When I first completed at CIIS in 2017, at the end of the certificate program, my mentor suggested I train with ketamine. And I was like, ketamine, boo, I don't want to work with ketamine. And I went and did a training, and I was blown away at the capacity of how it can really be helpful for people. It's helpful whether they do it in an IV clinic, not as effective, but when we use it as a tool for transformation in a psychedelic type of experience, we can have some really profound impacts. I'm not sure why there needs to be an argument around what molecule equals what. The reality is, if it helps people connect more deeply to themselves, to be more in alignment with their own personal integrity or truth or whatever, I don't know, I guess you don't have to do that with a psychedelic, but that's what it's done for me, then more power to us, right? Like, it's all in service of the betterment of ourselves, I think.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like you said, I mean, ketamine is already in use in hospitals across the country or in outpatient clinics. I mean, either as an anesthetic, so we can get better at just helping people utilize that experience that they might be having for other reasons, or it has been used as a treatment for depression for a long time. And it's demonstrated to greatly alleviate depression for at least in the short term when it's used just in the medical model. So I think it's a really great example of psychedelics changing our approach to medicine. So we used to just give people ketamine, and now there's a movement of ketamine-assisted therapy and different practices to enhance that effect. And really, it's basically, I think it's looking at that anything can be a medicine. It depends on how you approach it, and anything that you're giving to a patient can be enhanced with the way that you approach it. And so I also think I came into this work more recently with a little bit of a purist attitude. And I personally have chosen not to work with ketamine because it's not calling to me. I'm going to wait until other medicines become legal. But I've really grown to appreciate it from the work that other people are doing and the possibility of cross-pollination with existing medical treatments.
Thank y'all. I'm over here fighting not to burst out in all kinds of crazy smiles. Thank you. I appreciate this vantage point because, being in the psychedelic spaces in the underground, ketamine it's easily poo-pooed by a lot of people because it's a medicine that you can get prescribed. And people are starting to give that same type of vantage point to psilocybin that's been generated in laboratories and stuff. Oh, it doesn't have all the compounds that the mushrooms have. And yes, and so if we do this and we put these stigmas, what we're doing is we're doing the same thing that been done in the past. We're putting stigmas on things without really exploring the depth and getting intimate with things. So thank you for helping me get intimate with this and bring this intimacy to our audience at the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. I appreciate y'all's vantage point on these things. This is extremely helpful. It's wonderful, and I appreciate it. And so,
Can I add another little quick thing about that too, though?
Yeah, sure.
I do understand why people are concerned about lab created or pharmaceutical type of psychedelics, because there is such a power imbalance. There's so many problems with access to this type of work that there appears to be a lot of gatekeeping that will emerge as MDMA becomes legal, for example, absolutely made in a lab. Is this something that's our birthright to explore? And I think people are going to be using medicines no matter where they come from. And everybody deserves to be cared for appropriately in expanded states, regardless of what they're using, and also to know how to stay out of harm's way and how to optimize that experience.
That's what's honestly what I absolutely love about mushrooms. It's just, I love knowing that they grow and they will continue to grow. They're sustainable. They don't harm the environment. They can't really be over harvested. I'm really encouraged that in Oregon, I don't know if it's exclusively that the programs in Oregon use fungal matter, or if it's just that they can and they generally do use fungal matter. So that's a little bit encouraging to me.
I appreciate this. And one of the things that really important to me is the idea that we all come from the same source. Everything comes from the same source. If you want to call it God, if you want to call it the universe, whatever you want to call it, we all come from the same source. That includes all of the materials on our planet. When we look at one thing as more sacred than the other, we are denying the source in that thing. And so when I look at these substances, I'm seeing the universe in all of it, and the sacredness doesn't leave. It's how I revere it, and it's how I lean into that sacred. So I appreciate the way y'all are leaning into the edge with this stuff.
Yeah. And it's not psychedelic exclusive. Many of the medicines we work with as nurses come from plant roots or come from these places. And the ways that we can change in our nursing practice is to maybe take a moment with that medication before we're offering it to our patients, to acknowledge where it comes from, or to even have gratitude for the hands that made it specifically for the service that it's intended for. That can really change, I don't know, how I feel about giving it. At least makes it more meaningful.
Echo.
And we appreciate you so much, Ta, and your energy and your honesty, authenticity, and the work that you're doing to uplift others. Thank you.
Thank you, family. I thank you. I appreciate that, family. I love people, and I did not always allow the love that I have for people to shine out. And so I let it shine so that somebody that may not feel or know that they are loved could see that they are loved by at least one person who has limitless supplies. My love is unending. There is no limit to the supply of love that I have. And so when I can turn that light on and show somebody else that they have an unlimited supply of that, they can reflect that. Remember, I inspire you, you inspire me. I inspire you, you inspire me. Continue to grow.
And if that's what psychedelics do, then fuck yeah.
All the way, yeah. Well, this has been awesome, family. I appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all check out everything about Return to Roots in the liner notes. If you loved this podcast, and I know that you did, make sure you rate, review, subscribe, and share this with a friend. Tell somebody else about this. Tell all the nurses that you know about this and let them get informed. Just because nurses have been to college and school and they've been working for years doesn't mean that they're informed about everything. Let's get everybody informed. Thank you so much, Angela, Stephanie. Appreciate y'all. I love you, and I can't wait to catch up with y'all in person at some point. This has been wonderful. Thank you for checking in with the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. I love you. Be easy and be free. I'll catch y'all on the flip side. Peace.
Integration is not optional.